Welcome everyone to Triton's webinar on Will Your Customer Success Department Survive? Thank you for joining us today. I'm Jen McLean-Rogan. I'm the Vice President of Client Success here at Triton's. I'll be moderating this webinar, and Jason Whitehead, the CEO of Triton's, will be the presenter. And for those of you who are new to Triton's or just not that familiar with us yet, we are a training and consulting company. We're focused on customer success, software adoption, and organizational change. And since 2006, we've been helping SaaS vendors and buyers all over the world dramatically improve their business results from use of technology. And to learn more about us and the services that we offer, we encourage you to visit our website at tritons.com. And just for some housekeeping items before we get started, this webinar is being recorded, and a copy of it will be available on our site under the Resources tab. And during the webinar, please type your questions into the Q&A box, and we received a few questions in advance that we'll be addressing throughout this webinar. And just for you to know, we target about 30 minutes for presentation, and then we leave about 15 minutes at the end for questions and answers. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter, Jason Whitehead, to introduce himself.
Hi, thanks everyone, and thanks Jen. So my name is Jason Whitehead. I'm the founder and CEO of Triton's, and as Jen indicated, we do work in customer success and software adoption and organizational change. Just a little bit about my background. I've spent over 20 years working hands-on with organizations, both helping them implement technology, make sure they get it up, running, and live, and I've done that both as a consultant, as an internal resource, but then also helping to make sure that once the system is live, that people are getting business value from it and they're achieving their business goals with it, and that it's being used effectively and as designed many years into the future. So having worked with both the buyers of software and the sellers of software, we bring a lot of great best practices and perspectives on how the two can come together very closely together. So we're really excited to have this webinar, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Jason. To give us a little context before we get started, can you share with the audience what customer success is from our viewpoint?
Sure, Jen. I think it's really important that we get this out. Customer success has a lot of different definitions and perspectives depending who you're speaking with. And for us, it's really about helping the software vendors or any vendor on a subscription basis really make sure that their customers are getting the business outcome the customer needs, so that the customer will renew and expand their account. So it's really making sure that the customer is successful so that the vendor organization is successful as well. And what we found is that there's usually a whole host of issues that prevent customers from getting that business outcome that they need, that customers may not be able to do it on their own, or they don't necessarily want to do it on their own, which really impacts the ultimate business outcomes that the customer gets and the renewal decision. So what we're looking at here is how do customer success teams from the vendor perspective actually help the customer adopt technology and products and services better to get those outcomes they want, and what can be done to make sure this is done in an effective manner for both parties.
Great. And can you talk a little bit about some of the problems that we've seen with customer success and some of the reasons for it?
Sure. We've seen quite a few different problems out there right now. And one of the things that strikes us is that there's a lot of energy and momentum around customer success. We're seeing a lot of job listings for it and a lot of increasingly people putting resources to it. But what's not as obvious is that there's already the success rate of customer success initiatives within an organization is already starting to show some cracks. And many organizations that we've spoken to, and we've interviewed a lot of people for this webinar, they tried customer success for a year, or they tried it for a couple of years, and they put some resources to it, and they hired some folks and spent some money on it. But then for a variety of reasons, they ended up cutting the program or dramatically scaling it back. And we've heard this many, many times of people didn't think customer success would work here. We didn't understand the value. We've heard things such as the CEO and the other executives either weren't supportive or lost faith, or they were replaced along the way. So as a result, some companies are on their second and third attempt trying to get this right. And not only have they wasted a lot of time and money through that hasn't delivered value, but they still have not solved their underlying business need and issue, which is renewals and expansions and churn, all of those issues. So I think it's important to understand that this problem is significant, and as customer success as a discipline continues to grow, there's going to be more and more instances of organizations really struggling to get it right and get it effective. So a lot of attention needs to be paid to how do we make sure that the success team itself is successful and the success program is.
Great. So now that you've provided us a context of what CS is and some of the problems that we've seen with it, let's talk about how big of an issue this is.
Right. I think it's a very. I think it's sorry, Jen.
Sorry. Why is getting executive leadership level buy-in important as well?
You know, it's so important because for customer success to be effective, you need to have a long-term view and outlook on it, and you need to devote resources to it, and you need to shift your business model to embrace customer success and to embrace the impact it can have on renewals and churn and growth. And this is a big shift for a lot of organizations, especially software companies that may have been around for a very long time that have never had customer success and are not quite sure why they need it now if they did just fine in the past. You know, I think also as we've been talking with more and more people, it's been clear that CS teams that have become extinct, they may have thought they had executive leadership commitment and buy-in, but they really didn't. Or they tried to get it, but they didn't quite get there. And we've also seen instances where the CEO may have been replaced at some point and suddenly the new one comes in, eliminates the team. He or she doesn't understand the value or doesn't believe in the potential impact for their investment. So it's very important for the success in the future of a customer success program to make sure you've got that leadership commitment and that it handles itself well and goes throughout the rest of the organization. I think also some things to keep in mind is when people are building customer success programs and practices, they tend to get pretty focused internally on their CS team and working with customers, that oftentimes they miss the need to really recognize this is a huge transformation for the vendor organization itself. And introducing a new customer success program has ripple effect, and it impacts other departments like sales and product and chief revenue, the revenue departments, marketing and support and training. That having this new organization come up and carving out roles and responsibilities for the CS team will shift the work and the roles and the expectations for the other folks in the department. And that process needs to be managed very, very carefully if it's going to be effective throughout the organization. So I think that's a really key thing to keep in mind.
So let's talk about some actions or some recommendations. What is something that a customer success team should do to get executive leadership level support for a CS team in the long term?
You know, such an important question, because I think many times people will come to us and say, I recognize I need it, but what do I actually do? Where do I start? Where can I go? So today I did want to share a few different things that I think many people can take and implement in their own organization. I think the first one that I want to really talk to is making a distinction between short-term and long-term efforts for customer success, and really how to identify how executives need to be supportive in each phase. You know, many executives from chief revenue officer and CEO, they're used to running their business on a quarterly basis. You know, we've got sales numbers we need to hit, we have revenue numbers we need to hit, we've got to report up to the street or to our board or to our investors. We've got to show quarter by quarter the impact that we're having and that we're doing the things that will make a difference. And many executives are forced to have that long-term perspective where customer success, especially for a new organization getting set up, it's a long-term play. It takes time to build out a customer success team. You've got to set things up. You've got to start your operations. There will be a learning curve. Some things you try will need to be adjusted. It may not have the impact that you want. So you've got to make sure that that people understand that this is a long-term commitment, which is tough if people are used to working in the short-term world. And I think related to that, as we talk some about how to be supportive in each phase, is really looking in at some of the metrics as well too. One of the things that often comes up is, oh, what are the metrics for customer success? And people come to the old standbys of, net promoter score and customer satisfaction and, reoccurring revenue and all these very important metrics, which really are great ways to start measuring your business and the impact of customer success and where to focus your efforts. But it's important to recognize that those metrics are not appropriate on day one. Those are long-term metrics. You need to spend time early on capturing some baseline data to understand what those will be, starting to look at the capabilities that you're going to build to impact those different metrics and the services. And then you need to spend some time gathering some of those metrics data, which is really historical data, so that you can start to see trends and patterns and understand what's making a difference. If you start to advocate that we need to go for those long-term metrics from day one, before you're really built out your operations and you're set to scale, it's going to be really tough. So one of the things that we talk about is, let's make a distinction between short-term trajectory metrics and the long-term metrics to show impact and performance of your CS team. So let's talk about that for a second. In the short term, if you're coming in and you're trying to set up a new customer success team from scratch, there's going to be a lot of effort and lead time to figure things out and build out your protocols and your team and your practices and start to work with customers and start to go through the learnings that you need to do, as well as to work with your internal team. What you need to do is really get the other executives internal to your organization to really get a shared vision of what will this look like when we are at that maturity level where we can have that impact that we want, and then work backwards and sort of build out a timeline, say, what are the steps and things that need to happen to build out this capability and start to deliver this impact that we want? What's the timeline it takes to define our customer success activities and services, to hire and train our team, to build out our playbooks, if necessary, implement a customer success tool and an automation piece, and start to gather baseline metrics so we can deliver this? And how do we make sure that in the short term, and this could be 12, 18, maybe even 24 months, depending on the size and complexity of your organization, how do we demonstrate that we're on the path to deliver what we will in the long term? And that's really what we call trajectory metrics. What are the milestones? We've agreed the activities and the timelines and who's going to do what. How do we make people understand that this is how we will measure success in the short term while we're trying to get people to keep the faith for the long term? And that's really, really important to do. If your CEO, keep in mind that they're looking at how did we do this quarter or this year even, and they're looking at the impact that customer success had. If they're trying to measure you against outcomes when you're not yet in a position to deliver those, and everyone's known all along, it's going to cause a lot of problems for you as a customer success leader. So instead, get them committed to the short-term metrics and the progress and the trajectory, and that you're on track, and keep them focused on that until you're ready to transition over to the long-term metrics. Which I think leads to the next point is, you will need to transition to the long-term metrics at some point, the net promoter scores and the other pieces, and really make sure that people can say, all right, here's how we can justify that we're having the impact on business outcomes for our organization and for our customers. Here's how we're being successful and that we're making a difference for our customers and ourselves. So when you go to actually switch over to that, make sure that you've gathered some baseline metrics and that you've got some activity and you can show some of the impact of the CS team, and that you can start to show some trends of what's changed as a result of your work. But then make this transition explicit. Let people know that say, hey, now we're ready to start measuring and tracking our performance based on these long-term metrics. Let's talk about where you've been. Let's talk about the trends that you're starting from, and then really make sure that you're saying now you can see the impact. And that may be 12, 18, 24 months down the road before you're ready for that. So this is a key action I think people can take, is separating out short-term and long-term metrics.
Great. So now that you've talked a little bit about making the impact, both short-term and long-term, visible, what else can a customer success team do to get executive buy-in?
Oh, this is a really good question. I think one of the big ones is make it actionable internally and for the executives. And everyone needs to have some skin in the game. Where we've seen organizations get into trouble is they've hired up a customer success director or VP, and they've expected this person to just make it happen on their own in isolation without the collaboration and support from the other departments and the CEO and other executives that they need to really be effective. So one of the things that we recommend is that you go through, as you're going through this visioning process with the executives, and not just the CEO, but other departments, sales, product, whoever needs to be involved, and you've marched out sort of the timeline of what needs to happen to deliver these customer success services, you also map out what are the touch points with the other departments internally and where they may need to adjust things. So, for example, where do you need to map out how sales needs to change the way they engage with customers and with customer success teams during a pre-sales process to make sure things go well and that they're being set up for success, or how to manage a sales transition in an onboarding phase more effectively, or how to handle renewals now that there's a customer success team that's working with customers in a way that sales is not, mapping those activities out. I think similarly, how to make sure that you're mapping out how the customer success team can work with product managers and product developers, and those pieces is very, very key. So as you're mapping all this out, what you want to also do is make sure that all the executives from the other departments and the other leadership, that they're being actionable and demonstrating their commitment to the success of the CS program. One of the quotes that we talk about a lot is, we judge ourselves by our intentions, but we judge others by their actions. So try to think through, what are the actions that other executives can take to demonstrate that they are supportive? What are the words that they should be using to say, hey, as a CEO, I've got a lot of demands on my time, and for the rest of the organization, when you see me come to these meetings, or when you see me allocate resources and hire staff for this, understand this is a big commitment. I'm very supportive of this customer success initiative. I need the rest of you to get out there and be supportive too. And here's what that looks like, and here's what that means. So identify specific actions that you want the other executives to take, identify specific language or behaviors you would like them to take, and ask them to do that. And then really track and write down, did these executives do these activities by the agreed date? Come back in your executive meetings and how are we against our plan? Did we do what we said we would do? And keep it very visible for both the executives and also the rest of the organization, the commitments that other executives are taking to the success of the CS program. That's such a good one to both make it skin in the game and actionable, but also if people start to have their reputation on the lines, that they're out there saying, I'm going to do these actions, and you're making it visible and getting them to commit to doing things, that's a very, very powerful steps to making this work. So I think that's a key action that I highly recommend for a lot of folks.
And that ties in well with your next recommendation?
Yep, it sure does. And the next one is proactively reach out to and collaborate with the other departments. So as you start to get the executive support, start to work down the chain as well too, to the frontline staff and to the managers as well. And really make sure that you're figuring out, not just that you're making them aware of what you do, but you're figuring out how we collaborate together and the combined impact you guys have on the customer and the success of the customer's organization, and ultimately renewals and churn. I spoke with one CS leader, and she gave me the example that when she was leading up a global CS team, she made a specific trip to another country, to their offshore development team, just to meet with the developers to explain the vision of customer success, talk about the ways they work with the developers and the development team, help ask the developers, how can we work together as we're working with customers, to bring you insights and actionable intelligence that will help you as developers. Asking them, how do we collaborate together in these different processes so that we get what we need and the customer gets what they need, but you get what you need, and really defining how to work together. And that was so key to getting the commitment from the frontline folks that make the difference on a day-to-day basis. And then, this person told me, and I've heard this from others, is that's not a one-time event. You need to go through and make sure that you're staying in touch with them on a regular basis. So one leader told me that she would go to the weekly meetings of the sales folks or the weekly meetings of the product managers just to represent the customer success team, to share what they're hearing and what they're seeing and what they're doing, to ask for help and support, but also to listen to hear, what do these teams need that I can offer them that will be of value to them, that will make them want to work with us well, and how to maintain those relationships. So it's really important that you keep following up on a regular basis with those groups. And then the final piece, I think, related to that proactive outreach is making sure that you give credit and visibility to the other departments for the support that they're giving you and the impact that other departments are having on the customer. If there's something that product management does that dramatically improves the business outcomes for your customer or really helps solve a problem, make sure that everyone knows it. Give a lot of credit for that and thank them publicly and visibly for that. There's going to be there's more than enough success to go around, and really making sure that the other departments see you and understand that you are more than happy to share the credit for things that you didn't do that have the impact that everyone wants. That goes a long way to building the goodwill and collaboration practices that you want. So I highly recommend that proactive outreach to other departments as a key action.
Great. So you focus a lot on what a customer success team should do. Is there anything that they should not do?
Yep, there's one big one that we like to call out a lot, which may seem obvious to folks, but it isn't always, and that is avoid complaining outside the CS team. The customer success team cannot be perceived as people who complain and moan about issues, whether they're complaining about the customer or complaining about sales or marketing or other departments or product. It's really important that customer success teams be viewed by others as a positive group that's really trying to make a big impact on folks. And this is hard because there will be a lot of times that you will get pushback from clients and from your own internal peers. Making sure that the customer success team knows the right way to vent and deal with their frustrations and the appropriate forms in which they can do that, and knowing what's not okay. And you need to be very explicit about that as a CS leader. One CS leader I spoke with about this indicated that when she was leading her team, she said, these are the things that are not okay. No complaining out, no doing this, no talking about this, even at lunch tables and things like that, where you might be overheard by people who might miss the point but know what's going on or might misconstrue some things. And here are the venues in which it's okay to talk: in a team meeting when it's just us, in one-on-ones, in a private office, things like that. Here's how you constructively vent and deal with frustrations, but outside of this, you put on that nice collaborative face. I was on a project years ago where we were a bunch of external consultants and we got called in by our internal leadership one day. Apparently, some people had been at the hotel or restaurant or bar or what have you, and they were decompressing and venting about the day, not realizing that members of the customer staff were in the same room and overheard a large portion of the conversation, which was not very positive of the client or the project. And suddenly the customer was very upset and concerned about this, and rightfully so. So the entire consulting team got taken to task for this behavior and really said, these are not appropriate forms in which you can vent. You never know who's going to be there or at the next table or who will take things out of context or not understand. So here's the right way in which you can complain and deal with your stress, which needs to be dealt with, but it's very important that you make those expectations explicit and that you make sure if there are instances that you find out where people are being complainers, that you address those aggressively and quickly to prevent that from continuing. So I highly recommend, the thing not to do is make sure that there's no complaining outside the CS team.
That's a great recommendation. So before we move on to questions and answers, can you share with us one more recommendation?
Yep, I think one that is so impactful yet is so often overlooked is getting your customers to share the impact and benefits of working with a CS team with your internal organization. Get them to be your advocates and your cheerleaders. We spend a lot of time getting customers to give references to other customers or to give a quote and testimonials for the purpose of sales, but people don't tend to put as much time asking the customer to give an internal testimonial or internal reference, an internal success story. And it's really important if you're the CS team working closely with a customer, if the customer has a great experience or really appreciative of something you've done, make sure the rest of the organization both is aware of that to celebrate your success, but can share in it themselves too. And this comes back to giving other departments credit for what they did and where it's a team effort. So some things you can do, you can ask them for a written testimony, you can ask for a video. Another thing that's very impactful is actually invite people from other departments, whether it's product or support or sales or marketing, to attend a business review meeting with the customer. And you may need to prep them in advance and say, look, your role in this meeting is just to be an observer. Please don't talk or please don't ask questions. We've got a tight agenda, but here's what I want you to listen for and understand, and here's some about the backstory. But let them hear the customer firsthand, understand what's been going well and where they've been challenged and the role that CS has played in their success, as well as the role of the rest of the organization and really what are the benefits they've had from that. That can go a very long way. One quick story that I think really illustrates the impact of this. We were working as consultants doing a software adoption project with a client, and we were working very tightly with the technical team and the vendor and the project managers and the client IT group and the client end users and client executives. And there were quite a few areas during the implementation process where either the vendor and the technical folks and project management didn't understand why the adoption team was focusing on what they were focusing on, and the client may not have fully understood it either. And then we get through the implementation, and 3, 4, 5 months later, we're doing a lessons learned review and a business outcome review with them, interviewed a whole bunch of the end users and their managers and people from other departments, and pulled out some themes. Then when we got everyone together, including the client staff and client IT and client executives and the vendor staff and project managers and developers, and we facilitated back some of the observations and what people had said to us, and then we did some action planning work with them, what came out of it was fascinating. One, the biggest issues that were impacting their business success and their outcomes had nothing to do with the technology. 95% of it was organizational, people, and behavioral. And then two, what I thought was fascinating is as they heard the stories and they heard the examples from the customers and they understood all the issues that came into using the technology on their day-to-day basis, suddenly the technical folks and the project managers and the vendor staff said, now I get it. Now I know why you're doing what you're doing. Now I know why it's so important for you to ask these questions 6 months ago, or so important for you to have that conversation, 3 months ago, wherever you were. That as you are building out your customer success capability, letting others hear firsthand and getting that aha that they understand why you do what you do and the impact will come much later, but it will come. That's very critical to being able to work with them effectively going forward. So that's really a critical thing, and I highly recommend that get customers to share the impact and benefits of working with you, and when possible, get people from other departments to hear firsthand from the customer in a variety of formats what that was and why it made a difference, so that they get those aha moments for themselves.
Great, thanks, Jason. So now we'll move into the Q&A portion of the webinar. The first question is, one of the participants would like to know more about CS teams that are not tied directly to revenue. For example, they support success for customers using a free software that accompanies a medical device. The device is tied to revenue, but not the software.
Right, I think that's it's a great example, and one of the things that's important to remember is customer success is not specific to software, and there's a lot of organizations out there that are not software vendors, that may be product or service vendors that are selling on a subscription revenue and need to have successful customers for renewal and expansion opportunities. And the big thing to focus on here is not the software or the widget or the medical device, but the business outcome that your customer is getting from their interaction with you as an organization and what you're bringing to them. So if you're bringing to them a product and free software, what they're still interested in is that business outcome, the impact that it had. Or if you're doing the product and services, or software and services, the customer is concerned with the output and the outcome of that total relationship and combination of the two. So really focusing on total business outcome for your customer and helping them to realize that the outcome they're getting is a direct result of their relationship with your organization and all that you do holistically, that's pretty key. And then going from there, you can talk about how that translates into renewals and expansions and upsells and all that good stuff. But should always focus on the business outcome, not on the product or service or feature itself in isolation. Good question.
Great, thanks, Jason. Another participant is looking for ideas or advice on how to get the entire executive team to see CS as a cross-functional effort, meaning while we have a team of CS professionals, their success in making customers get value and renew is also dependent on support from all areas of the organization, such as marketing, product, and engineering.
Yeah, such an important thing. I think one of the things that really, this goes back to you need to spend a lot of time building collaboration up front and building a shared vision. And as part of that visioning process, one of the things that we like to map out is from the start of a customer's first point of contact with your organization, which may be a marketing flyer or an event or whatever it may be, right up through to that ultimate renewal point. And that renewal point could be 5, 10 years down the road, really mapping out that customer journey and customer experience, and then putting in what are all the touch points from the customer's perspective that affect both their perception and their business outcome, and working down through that. And what you can start to see is there's areas where marketing may touch them first, and sales may come on board, and then customer success may be brought on board pre-sale. Maybe customer success may have a role during onboarding and beyond. Whatever those touch points are, trying to map out who are the different departments that are having an impact on that customer experience and that customer outcome, and then how you need to work together. For example, we've heard some customers say, we get the customer live and they're excited, but then product management would push out a release without notification to the customers or without setting a process that works for the customers, and that really negatively impacted the relationship. And customer success had to go and try and clean some things up. Helping all groups to understand all of those activities impact the customer experience and customer outcome is pretty key, and then work backwards from there is really good. One of the things I like it too, if you've ever seen any bad TV show or horrible movie, you're like, how many people had to review this script and could have said no, and all these people had to sign off on it, all these people had to give budget to it to bring this, horrible, horrible experience to us. If only one person had said no, it would have been great. All this time could have been wasted, it could have been avoided. With customer success, think of all the people that have to say yes, and all the people that have to touch the customer to get a great experience. And any one of those people or one department that has a negative impact or negative experience really hurts things from the customer perspective. So trying to build up that aha moment for everyone, that no one person has complete responsibility and control here, but absolutely all of us could sink this if we are not working well together. And that's a real problem for us. It's pretty key. So that's a question we get a lot, and I think it's important that people start to look at that and spend a lot of time building those internal relationships.
Great. So the next question is, how can we avoid seeing CS as an extra cost, since none of the other functions can be eliminated and all of them add up to the total headcount?
I think this is an interesting question, and it really comes to some of the core pieces here. Some groups view customer success as a cost center, others view it as a profit center and a driver of growth. And I think if you can get your mind around the idea of customer success as a growth driver and possibly a profit center, that opens up a lot of doors and possibilities that you won't have. If you only view customer success as a cost center, the natural tendency is going to be, how do we cut headcount as low as we can? How do we do the minimal amount that we can? How do we try to automate things that shouldn't be automated so we can check the box that we've done it? And ultimately, what you're going to be doing is just minimizing the impact and potential value. If you say, hey, this is a driver of growth in this business and the customer success team, leading the charge to help our customers get even more value than they can will lead to renewals and expansions, and maybe even more than we thought possible. And there's been a lot of research on the extra value of retaining and expanding current customers as opposed to the cost of getting new ones. It's really quite powerful. So I would highly recommend reframing CS as a growth driver and a profit center for one, and then two, making sure that you're giving them the tools, resources, time, and budget that they need in order to deliver on that vision. So that's really pretty key. But I think if you can do that, you can get people to get out of the mindset of it's about headcount as opposed to it's about business impact, in very, very different ways, and trying to shift people's thinking of they're asking the wrong question if they're only focused on cost.
Great. When asking for client feedback, do you suggest that it's done via direct discussion or via marketing survey?
I think it depends, and it can depend on your product and service, and if you're B2B and B2C and where you need to go. But I think what's also important, though, is that it doesn't have to be an either or. This can be a let's gather input from a multiple collection of sources. So I think there's a lot to be said for getting in a conversation where you can probe and ask questions and you can get some good feedback. I think marketing surveys are great to get large number of pieces of feedback, or we can see trends, but also, if you think that people would not be honest and forthcoming with you for whatever reason, people are more comfortable in an anonymous format sharing what they really think. But then what we also see that I think it can be very impactful is getting neutral third parties to come in and engage in discussions on your behalf. There are a lot of times where external consultants, and Tritons has done work like this too, will go out and speak with customers and end users and people in other groups so that you can get honest feedback where as a third party, we don't have skin in the game and people are more likely to tell us honest, direct, good or bad, because they're not afraid of any political blowback or other repercussions that may be out there. So it's a very impactful way to do that. And I think if you're looking for just feedback for feedback's sake and to give as a data point, look at what's going to be fast and easy to do. But if you're really looking for in-depth insights to try and understand what are the things CS should be doing differently, what services have the most impact, what services are not having an impact, how do we change how we engage with customers, that's really where I think a neutral third party can be very, very impactful, and I highly encourage people to do that. So, for this question, I would definitely say all of the above.
Terrific. And our last question is, do you believe that utilizing a CS software to validate the value to clients or CS type certifications help internally?
I think they can help, but I wouldn't take them in isolation. So I think having numbers that you can point to is very important, especially for folks who are very numbers driven. So, finance people and others, that's very important. So I would recommend that. Certifications help give sort of a prestige and faith, especially in those early days of building out your CS program where people are trying to figure it out. So those are important. But I come back to what we discussed of getting the customer to give testimonials and examples that you can understand and go with is also very important. So you can get that business out that you can point to. So I think for all of those, having that is great information and all builds nicely together. But I don't think any one data point is going to make all the difference for you.
Great. So before we conclude the webinar, just again wanted to encourage you to check out our website and learn more about our products and services that we have. Our new customer success online training course is definitely one that we'd encourage you to check out. There is a free demo available for you to view, as well as we also have workshops and other training program catalogs that we encourage you to look through.
Great, and thank you so much for being here, everyone. If you have other questions or would like to learn more, please don't hesitate to contact us, info@tritons.com. We always enjoy sharing ideas and learning from others, so very happy to meet with folks and to share ideas and see where we can go. So thank you so much for joining us. Bye now.